Hello and welcome to the Black Comics Universe presented by Peep Game Comics exclusively here on The Experience. Please help us out by hitting share and giving us a like and a follow. Then make sure to tune in for our original programming 7 days a week. The Black Comics Universe streams every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on all DSPs, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Also, please follow Black Comics Universe on Facebook and Instagram at Black Comics Universe. And stay tuned for Miss Jen's Minute to Skim It right after this. All right. It's just me tonight, guys. I'm just going to be yammering about some comics and comic book collecting and things like that. I might have a guest. Hopefully he can make it. We'll see. Just continuing the discussion on comic book collecting. And Kyle, you can jump in here anytime you want to, if you so feel. There's a lot of news going on as far as comic book publishing that has affected comic book collectors, and I wanted to touch on some of those issues. Image Comics, for instance, has made an announcement that they will no longer, for the foreseeable future, maybe the next year or so, maybe even longer, no longer have second print runs of their books. And this is news that definitely affects comic book collectors, because those books that we're all collecting and purchasing, number one, will become that much more rare and harder to attain if they only do one print run. So that makes it even more important for collectors and people that visit traditional comic book shops. It's even more important that you guys order your books or create a pull list for your books in order to get some of these stories in your hand, because it may be that without a second print run, and a lot of people might be out of luck in terms of picking up books.
You said I could chime in, so here I am.
Yeah. Please. And I think I probably goaded you in with this topic, but yeah.
Yeah, you did. Sure. You may or may not have poked the bear, as it were.
Yeah.
So believe it or not, when I started working in comic shops, Image didn't do second printings.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, this has been their policy off and on now for a decade. There was a thing where they weren't doing second printings because, it doesn't make sense for us. We're a small publisher yet. And The Walking Dead was the highest selling book at the time. It didn't, whatever. Didn't make sense for them. And now they're going back to it, but now it's about paper stock, right?
Yes.
Printers can't get paper to make books, which, I mean, I don't know what it's going to take to make the books just I want to read, but y'all can borrow mine. Like, I got a couple of cases of paper in the next,
I know, right? It's one of the weirdest.
I've been to Office Max.
Yeah, I've seen plenty. Yes,
but no.
Some of these supply chains issues seems like okay, that makes sense, and some of it seems like I don't know.
It's about the kind of stuff they use. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I know the answer, but that doesn't make the joke any less funny.
True. Right. Right.
It's the same reason my buddy who runs a factory that uses vinyl is having trouble because they can't get giant rolls of vinyl. Like, okay, sure. I think what you're going to see happen is one of two things is going to happen. Either the speculation market's going to go into overdrive or it's going to die. One of the two. Like, the spec market could go nuts because low print runs and stuff, or it could die because people are going to get wise to putting stuff on their pull lists and talking to their local comic shop about, these are the books I want. And so the comic shops, when these low numbers come in, are going to be taken off the top for the people who have already claimed them, who have already said they're down to buy them. And so the spec market will die off because there's no copies for spec.
Well, I've experienced that. I've experienced that, and I think that's one of the issues that I've noticed that is somewhat particular to collecting Black comics, is because, like, as I've started collecting and I started actually looking for, Black comics that were, older Black comics, like say from the 90s and stuff like that, not even getting into golden or gold or bronze age. I'm just modern books. Those books are hard to find typically because most of those shops only order to meet the needs of the people that are on their pull list. And so, and typically, so a lot of those black comics, they weren't popular enough to gain like
stores
a
weren't carrying 10 for the rack.
huge orders, right?
Right.
Which makes it, which I was saying, like, which makes whites, for instance, very interesting. I'm actually surprised how involved and how much shops have actually invested in that book.
Well, but that was a book that we knew about the shortness on.
Right.
Like, I wonder if there's a difference. Like, I don't know. Because I wouldn't have ordered white the same way I would have ordered. We'll use another modern corollary as the way I would have ordered static.
Right.
Like, I would have ordered heavier on static than I would have on white. One, because I knew I wouldn't get them on white, but also because I would know what static is a known commodity.
Right.
So I wonder if that doesn't have something to do with it too.
Yeah. And I'm going to be totally honest with you. I'm not a fan of what they're doing with white as far as the print runs, and it's been ridiculous with some of that stuff. It's like,
well, and Marcus said why they do that. You know, you had Marcus on, and Marcus talked about it. And I asked him, I go, hey, you know, talk about print run setting. And, you know, Diamond has a certain number that they want minimum. If you're a company that can only, Black Mask is such a small company.
Yeah.
Getting to 2,500 might be the most they can budgetarily do at that point. So now they're stuck. Right. But now they've set a precedent that they have to live to. Now it's doing 2,500 everything. Right. Whether we can afford to do 2,500 or 5,000, we're only going to do 2,500. Like, it's a precedent. Like, I don't know. Right. I have no idea.
I mean, there's something to that.
Yeah, but to me, that's the other part of this, right? Is that we're going to see companies like Black Mask and some of these other micro-sized companies are really going to struggle with print runs and production schedules in a paper shortage, because say what you will, but Marvel and DC have the capital to make sure their books get printed.
Yeah.
I mean, they might not get printed on time, but they're going to get printed, and they're going to get printed before all these small companies who are, I need 2,500 of this book, you know?
A lot of small publishers are going to be put on the back burner of a lot of
or they're going to have to find ways to pivot, right? So I was talking to a guy the other day who was talking about potentially investing in hemp paper. Problem is that the chemicals in hemp paper don't take color.
But why? Just out of curiosity, why exactly is there a paper shortage?
Because it gets made in China. Because it's sitting on boats in the Pacific. Yeah.
And it's cheaper, and it's that much cheaper.
Yeah, probably. And books get offset print in China and overseas.
True. Okay.
Yeah. It's right. Alterna does a thing with newsprint. They were one of the first people I saw pivoting to something that's a little more sustainable, pulp paper. You know, and it's about what gets manufactured here, what can get transported. The trucker shortage is having an effect because they can't put paper on trucks and get it where it needs to get. Like, there's all of this kind of stuff that's happening that is stacking up. So yeah, Alterna with newsprint. This guy who was looking at investing in hemp paper or alternative pulps, you know, paper made out of corn, like whatever else you could use so that they could fix their paper shortage problem. But they each have drawbacks and whatever. Like, I'm not an expert in this. I just read the internet. So,
I mean, as far as I can see, as far as collectors go, that could be a huge turnoff. You know, as far as quality of paper, as far as it being able to how well it keeps over time.
Right. And that was one of the reasons I didn't like Alterna Comics at first.
Mm.
Like it took me a while. I had to read several of their books before I was like, okay, I'll give them a shot, because I picked up my first one and I didn't like the way it felt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I was so used to the shiny gloss paper, and now you know me pretty well. Most of my paper is pulp paper at this point. Most of my books are that age,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of what I collect now. So it
Mm-hmm.
just took me a minute. So I don't know. Image only doing, back to the original premise of this, was Image is only doing first prints,
Mm-hmm.
or one print. There's going to be a massive change in the industry, a sea change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Bad Idea led the way a little bit
Mm.
in this concept, where it was, they didn't do second printings either. They just did not first printings. It was a, here's your first
Right.
printing, and then here's a perpetual printing that stays in print
Hmm.
forever.
I can see that, only because, and that's what's so interesting about the type of collecting I've been getting into, as far as like trying to support indies, is that, like, for instance, I have a Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer #1. Is this probably this? I know for a fact this is not the first printing of this. Will this affect the quality or the value of this book?
Probably not.
I don't think so. But and then it got me to thinking a lot about that, because it's like, I'm seeing people do shows and stuff like that and say, oh yeah, they sold out of this particular book and that one. But I see them do that several times over, which means they're probably having very, short print runs. And this book has probably gone through 20, 30 printings. It's like,
Well, but so that's the other thing, right? Is what defines a printing.
mm-hmm.
Um, like what defines a first printing versus a second printing. And
Mm-hmm.
so often the way you tell a first printing from a second printing is to look at the barcode.
Hmm.
Does your Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer #1 have a barcode on it?
No.
Right. Because indies don't put barcodes on their books because they don't have to.
Right.
Like that's a diamond or a book scan or a that's something that's been invented.
So if it's not being tracked, it doesn't.
By the tracking systems, by inventory systems, and an indie book, odds are you're tracking them differently.
Right.
I know I only bought 5 copies of this book. I have 1 left. I have 4 left. I sold 4.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
it's a much different tracking system. I never had my indie books. When I had the store, I had huge racks of indie books.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my things. I never tracked them in my inventory system.
Mm-hmm.
Because I tracked them on their own, because then I could go back to you or to Victor or to whoever and say, hey man, I need some more books.
Right.
Send me more books.
Right.
And the problem was I could never tell him how many I sold, because I'm like, how many did you leave? And he'd be like, I don't remember. I go, well, I sold everything you left,
Right.
So that was kind of, that was sort of that system. So if you're looking at first printing versus second printing in a mainstream book,
Mm-hmm.
you can tell. If you're looking at first printing versus second printing in an indie book, and if they're doing print on demand, is there ever really a second printing? Is there ever really a first printing? It's just, this is
No,
what my
right.
number is.
It's like, yeah. And I'm not even sure if they're tracking. Some of these indies might not even be tracking sales like that. Aside from what they can track on their Kickstarter, they could say, we sold so many books. But I think for an indie publisher, it's almost like they have a different set of priorities. The priorities aren't the same. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't, as much as me as a collector might be concerned with that stuff, I can definitely imagine that they're not necessarily paying attention to those small things. But I will, this is like my other thing I want to get into. Because now that I am a collector, I'm starting to paying attention to things that I wasn't paying attention to when I was just selling indies and just being a part of the indie culture, indie comics culture, so to speak. As a collector, I'm noticing things that I wish a lot of indies like start. I think maybe they should start paying attention to their print runs, or they, just if for no other reason than to attract more collectors to what they're doing. But even something as small as packaging when they're shipping out their books, I one of the people I've been working with ran into a problem because they send out their books in a in a mailer that literally got, and then someone showed, and I belong to a comic book collection group, and someone showed that book that it came, they got it warped, and it's like,
right there are packing books is the hardest thing, man. Like it is. Mm-hmm. It gives me so much anxiety.
Yeah.
Like,
well, I don't feel anxiety anymore because I started using Gemini mailers.
And that's it, right? Like I would use a Gemini mailer, but I'd put extra cardboard in it, and then I'd stick that Gemini mailer in something, and then I'd wrap that something in a bag.
Right.
Because the last thing I need is somebody yelling at me because their book got ruined. And unlike the kind of people we're talking about, right? Like the books I was selling, I had one of.
Right.
And if I'm selling you a book from 1953, I do not have another one to make that right.
To make that right.
So if I send it out and it gets wrecked, now not only am I out the book, but I've got to file a complaint with the postal service to get the money back, and then I got to go through that whole process so I can refund you your money. And then at the end, it's like I wind up breaking even or losing money on the whole thing because that's what it took. So I totally get that. One of the people that I always point to, and I would tell everybody, and I'm sure she has them available, and if she doesn't, I will make sure they are. Jen King did some amazing videos on how to pack comics, like so they don't get wrecked. I mean, they're just perfect, and if you do that, it works. And that was a big thing. Is once you figure out how to do it, it'll save you a lot of money.
Yeah, but it's one of those things that I don't think a lot of indies. It's like another one of the things on their list they don't necessarily prioritize.
Right.
And only because it's sort of like they might not realize like someone's purchasing this book as an investment. Like they feel like this book could be, become something more than just a comic book. So they're not just buying it for the cool story. But they're buying it as a,
I have a friend who sells cars.
Got it.
Once you drive that car off the lot, he no longer cares what you do with it. If I buy a car from him and I take it to a demolition derby, he don't care. He made his money. And so as there are two things, right? Like, is it the responsibility of the person who makes the art to be worried about the long-term, that's what I'm looking for. What happens to that art long-term? Like, is it Van Gogh's responsibility to worry about whether or not Starry Night is still popular? Or is it David Crownson's problem to worry about whether or not, Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer is collectible or not? Or is it his responsibility to make sure that he's creating content people want to read? And so that's the question, right? Like, if we're looking at collecting from an indie standpoint, what is the responsibility of the artist? And then what is the responsibility of people like you and me? Right? Like you're kind of in a weird spot in the industry where you're an artist,
a retailer,
and a person who does all this stuff. And I'm at this weird spot in the industry where I'm a hype man, but I'm also a retailer, but I'm also all this other stuff. So what is the responsibility of other people in the industry to David Crownson's work now? Because we both know how fire Harriet Tubman is.
Right.
So we're going to spend our time and energy making sure people know, hey, go get this book. This is going to be something.
Well, see,
and his job then becomes just to keep making that something.
Well,
it's like a food chain.
it's in a weird sort of way. It's like this. I put it to you like this. So, like for instance, as a retailer, right? If I'm looking at what David Crownson is doing, and I'm looking at the story and stuff like that, there might be some advice I might give to him that might go totally against what the typical collector might want. You know what I'm saying? So I might be looking at what he's doing and saying, you know what, floppies are cool, but you'll probably do a lot better with a trade. You know, as an indie, that's where you make your money. That's the better investment. As far as the time spent in, creating this and selling it and all this kind of stuff, doing all the Kickstarters and all this stuff, yada yada yada. It's probably smarter for you to go and put together. But now, on the other end of that, if I'm looking at collectors, and if I'm a retailer that sells to collectors, I'm gonna tell him, no, I need a floppy, right? Because it's like the collectors are gonna be looking for, issue number 1, issue number 2, as far as quote unquote first appearances and stuff like that. I don't see trades. That's one of the scariest things. As much as the industry is moving towards trades and graphic novels, I don't see those books. They don't move hardly at all in the trade market,
in the collector's market.
In the collector's market.
Well, but again, so is it our job as you and I to worry about the collectible market, or is it our job to worry about selling that story, right? And so, right. I'll give you, for instance, this is Chasing the Bird, Charlie Parker in California, by Dave Chisholm from Z2 Comics. This is a book about Charlie Parker, the musician. This is the only way this book came out. It was a hardcover collected edition. You could buy the more expensive slipcover version, but it was still a hardcover. Now, that book is as collectible as it will ever be. Like, I don't know. It could get more collectible. Dave Chisholm could get signed on to do Venom and be the next big thing, and who knows, right? But this is the way this book is. So it's about, is the art good? Is the product good? And then it's my job to sell that product, or it's my job to care about that product, not necessarily to care about how the creator makes the product. And then at the same time, as a collector, if I'm a collector and this is what I'm collecting, I have to just ride that wave. I can't be like, oh, I'm not going to collect. I collect, jazz books about jazz. Okay. Well, this is the way this book came. You either collect it or you don't.
Well, if it's about collecting for the sake of collecting, like there's some books, for instance, that I have in my collection that it has more sentimental value more than anything. Right.
Right. Are we talking about collecting for the sake of collecting, or collecting for the sake of speculation?
But that's another side of it. So like there's some books I picked up strictly for speculation. Like I just got this in the mail today. Adventures Forever #1. That's something I'm speculating on. It's like I don't have no news, no tidbits or anything like that. Is it something saying, you know what,
but
I think
you're really not collecting that book then? You're
it's
investing.
Part of my collection. I'm investing. And
so different thing, like, right?
Right. And so, but that's still a part of, like, for instance, we know for a fact that in any given moment, Marvel and DC could decide to not do floppies anymore, and they'll just go straight to trades or books, right? It's like they're inching that towards that way, and I feel like the only reason why they don't is because of so much energy and hype is still generated from single issues, from the speculative market, because especially for Marvel, I can't say I'm to DC to a lesser degree, but especially for Marvel, and then you're starting to see it happening even more with some indies. Like when you see what Tinian is doing and stuff, it's like, this stuff is not.
Let's talk about the real nuts and bolts of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So every week, every publisher sells X number of single floppy issues to retailers.
Right.
That means they get X number of dollars coming into their coffers.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't do that and just switched to trades, that money would change. Instead of getting that every week, it would come out every 6 months.
Right.
I mean, that's why they don't switch. I mean, the down and dirty of it is that it might make more sense to only make trades.
Right.
But guess what? You're still going to wind up spending as much money, if not more, making the trade. And that payoff is going to take that much longer to get there. And Disney and whoever owns DC at this point, they're not going to wait to get their taste. So what they'd have to do is they'd have to stop publishing.
Right.
They would have to go fully digital and charge for that rather than give up single issues. Because that's where trades really happen for the big companies, right? They've already paid for everything that comes out in a trade.
Right.
They already own all that content. So they're just repackaging it, and a trade is nothing but a money grab. Because they're not paying those artists and those writers again.
True. That's a good point.
So that's all the trade is, right? Is a money grab. Well, if they're having to put all their investment into that trade and get all that money back out on that trade, they're going to stop making money. So that's why single issues matter, right? That's what keeps the wheels of the industry turning. That's the gasoline. The fancy, the fancy whatever else, if you want to keep the car analogy going, comes from the trade. The tinted windows and the 8-disc CD changer. Do people still have CD changers? Anyhow, you know what I mean? Like whatever that is comes from the trade. That's where the bonus money comes from. And then you get into IP development.
Right.
And that's where the real big bags of money show up.
Right.
So it's the way you cut out, the way you transition is to going to digital, which is you're paying those artists and those creators and you're selling it digitally in whatever form that takes, and then just skipping right ahead to the IP development. But you're cutting out all of that middle cost of making trades, printing singles, all that kind of stuff. Shipping.
I mean, printing singles and shipping, stuff like that, right?
So
all that to say, sometimes I've been wondering lately, did I pick the wrong time to start getting into actual collecting? Like, it's like, am I too late to this? Do I still have time to really have an actual real investment? Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy it.
Right.
I think if nothing else, I'm addicted. But as far as the actual investment side of it, I'm not so sure if I feel like I might have missed out on the real opportunities that might have been there, 10 years ago.
That's the second question.
What's that?
That's the second question, right? Is it, are you collecting because you enjoy collecting and are addicted to collecting and want to share that with your kid and want to share that with your community? Or are you collecting because if I buy this book now, in 10 years, I'll be able to flip it for 10 times what I paid for it? Like, are you collecting to collect because it matters? Or are you collecting to invest because it's profitable? And I always told people, if you're collecting to invest, you're going to lose money. It ain't the stock market where it could be up. You're going to lose money because you're going to buy more books that don't pan out than you're going to buy books that pan out.
That's a good point.
Unless you're buying today and selling tomorrow, which is the height of speculation. Like that's the worst part of speculation, is the guys who come in, who will be in their local comic shop first thing in the morning, and by tomorrow night that book will be on eBay. Like that's it.
Yeah, I was it's weird. I'm in a
JD Smith says buy crypto, and the only crypto I would invest in is a space dog that runs around with Superman. He also says not financial advice. Right. Invest in alien pets.
Yeah.
But no, I had this conversation with a guy when I still had my store who every week would come in and he would get he'd get his pull list. He had a great pull list, but every week he was trying to add books that came out in 2 or 3 weeks that were going to be high spec books. And I said to him, I go, are you buying these and flipping them, or are you buying them and reading them? He goes, I'm reading them. I go, and then what are you doing? He goes, I'm sitting on them for when they go through the roof. I go, every one of these books is going to go down before it goes up. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, you're paying $4 for that book. Yeah. It's going to go down before it goes up. It's going to be worth nothing long before and for a lot longer than it's going to be worth something.
So what drove, so for instance, how is it that something that's killing the children is able to basically become so valuable so quickly?
Because there are outliers to every rule.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
that was a book that when it started, I read the first issue and went, this is no good. And then it got real good real fast. And because people thought like me, there weren't that many of the early issues around.
Yeah, right. And then by the time you went looking for it, it was like you couldn't find it.
Well, by the time I went looking for it, I just bought the trade. Like,
well, see, that's where I'm at. It's like, so.
But I don't collect for financial reasons. Like, my collection, the stuff I collect for financial reasons was financially viable long before I started collecting it. The stuff I collect because I like to collect it, like Something Is Killing Children, like Basket Full of Heads, like that's
actually worth something.
No, it's not worth anything, but I love it, so I collect it.
Oh yeah.
I love Stephen King and Joe Hill.
I read the trade of that.
Right, I love Stephen King and Joe Hill, so anything with those names on it that comes out, I collect. You know, it's East of West was a great example. God Is Dead by Jonathan Hickman. I love these books, so I collected them.
Right.
The stuff I bought for investment reasons was a different thing. So with Something Is Killing the Children, it wasn't a small print run, but it wasn't a huge print run. It was a Boom Studios print run. It was a mid-range. J.D. Smith, we can get into that. But no, it was a mid-print range, but there were a number of people like myself who didn't get it. I didn't get it either. By the time they did get it, like, who didn't understand it, who didn't see the value, who didn't see that it was going to be something that was good. And by the time we did get it, it was too late.
But here's the thing, though. But it's like, we know that the story, the quality of the story itself isn't necessarily what's driving the value of that book. It's like,
well, but
I think most of it is like that, between the hype and, you know, there's more hype that's driving that price up than the actual quality of the story, which is great.
But it's a supply and demand thing then. It becomes a supply and demand thing, right? So because there were a number of people who didn't understand what it was, and so the print run was small on the first few issues.
Right.
Then people are like, oh, I get where this is at now, and I get what makes it good. And the print runs went up, but not tremendously.
Right.
You know, they went up a moderate amount because Boom is not dumb. They're not gonna just jack their print runs way up, you know, and make, you know, so that they've got a ton of extra books. No, they're gonna be smart about it. So that's what happened. And so then you have a supply and demand issue, because you have people who are picking this book up because there's a lot of demand for it and there's not a lot of copies. And then you have people who are trying to pick it up because they want to have it.
Right.
And so those two things, it's the dog wags the tail wags the dog kind of conversation. It's a chicken and the egg, you know, whatever analogy you want to use. And then all of a sudden the book explodes. Black or white and black are two different are from the same publisher have the exact same kind of thing happen though, where we knew there wasn't going to be many. So the people who wanted them because they weren't going to be many drove the people who wanted them because they wanted to actually read them. You wanted it because you wanted to read it, right? And you knew it was going to be something.
And I knew it was going to be valuable too. I knew they were option and all that kind of stuff.
I wanted it because I knew I wanted to read it. Don't care if it's going to be optioned or not. Right. Not part of my battle plan, as it were. So it just turns into the different ways people access the industry.
Like, for instance, I loved this book, Nita Hawes.
Yes, Rodney Barnes.
Blog. Rodney Barnes is a beast. Now, this is what because I'm working in two different directions. I'm working as a fan of Barnes, right? Now I'm trying to find all the Barnes books I possibly can. At least the number ones of, I know he wrote Falcon. He wrote, he did a Lando book for Star Wars. It's like, now I'm collecting.
He's doing a bunch of stuff at Dynamite.
Now I'm a Rodney Barnes fan. I'm looking for Rodney Barnes books.
Right. But you also have this weird problem now where you've read Nita Hawes and you've got to go back and make sure you get all of the Philadelphias.
Well, not just that. When I went to see, this is a perfect case in point. When I went back to find, this is almost like something that's killing the children. It's like I wanted to get Philadelphia issue 1, right? Now, this is the perfect example. It's one of those books where it was a small print run in the beginning. People didn't really get it. It was only ordered a handful of orders for, people that might have been on somebody's pull list. So by the time I'm out there looking for number 1, I almost missed it. Like, I got a copy for, I was lucky enough to get a copy for like $20-$30.
See, and when I bought my number 1, I bought the local comic store day variant right after it came out.
Right.
And I think I paid $15.
So I don't like that.
Was that variant. That was that variant though. Like it was.
No, but at the same time, what variant though?
The local comic store day variant.
Because it's one of those variants. What's that guy's name? Francesco?
Yeah, it's not like Francisco Francavilla.
That variant is bananas.
Right. Like, no, it's
what's funny? It's like, did you see he mentioned that when we interviewed him for BCU? He had a rack of them sitting behind him. And I was just like, yo, what? It's like, I was like, I almost asked him for a copy, but that'd have been weird. That would have been awkward. But
yeah, that'd have been weird.
But that book is like right. 500 some bucks now.
I don't have any idea. I don't track that stuff. Like I made a post on Facebook a while back about Key Collector.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
And I think you commented on it.
Probably.
I have a problem with the idea that Key Collector has so much power in the industry right now and such a narrow view on what is and isn't a key.
That's part of the reason why. That was a huge reason why I started collecting. And I do pay attention to some of the hype around some of these books, because I'm trying to really understand from a historical standpoint, right? It's like when I'm looking at, these Black comics, they're rare, they're hard to find, and yet the values of some of these books, some of them aren't even tracked at all. Some of these books don't even show up on Key Collector or anything else for that matter.
Right. Because Key Collector doesn't see them as a key, which is kind of a ridiculous thing. That's
right. And it's like,
that's the point.
But knowing that, which makes the idea that there's an app that sort of suggests this even more ridiculous, because keys are so arbitrary.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I've even thought about it, crossed my mind even today. I was like, man, hell, I could create a Black Comics key app. You know what I mean? It just be keys that are particular to my community. It's like I think that it's definitely a very narrow community in that regard. Like, so like now, unless so like yeah, like most books don't even show up on that app unless there's some type of huge news or hype around that book.
Right. Or unless you tell them, hey, this is a key you forgot. Which
Well,
means which means they're not
last
doing the work to track what actual keys are. They're just asking you to tell them.
right, because I think what was funny because I think I made I was complaining about something that wasn't showing up in. I don't think it was Key Collector. It was in Comic Book Pricing Guide.
Yeah,
and they had a value. They had a book I had just picked up. It was just a ridiculous value for a 9 point something, and this was like this doesn't make any sense. What book was that? But what was weird was after I made that post, like a couple of days later, it got switched. It got fixed, and I wouldn't be surprised if somebody came across my comment. I wouldn't be surprised if something. It's because it's like the degrees,
right. No,
like
it's So JD Smith had asked. He said, "I'm kind of out of the loop on this. I remember Wizard Magazine used to have pricing guide, but where does one go these days to find the value of individual comics, and how do they value projects / comics from Kickstarters?" Well, that's a whole thing, right?
That's a whole yes, because those Kickstarter books aren't in the direct market, so they're not being tracked. They're not since they're not a part of the direct market, not part of Diamond. None of these pricing guide, those books don't show up in there. They don't show up. None of those books show up on any apps.
So just to amend what you're saying real quick, and it's not because they're not in Diamond, it's because they don't go through distribution. So there's so the numbers of how many books are on the market aren't known. The thing about it, when a book goes through distribution, eventually the numbers come out as to say this many copies were sold through distribution of this book. Now, when you do a Kickstarter, because that number of whatever that print run is and the number of whatever's in the market is totally at the discretion of the creator. So if I were to give you an example, a friend of mine did a Kickstarter that did over $100,000. His book currently is the #1 pre-ordered book on Amazon. The release of this book, or it was. I don't know if it still is, but it was for a while. So all those numbers will be public information,
right?
Because they have to be. If Imani makes a book and does a Kickstarter or a crowdfunding of any kind, he don't got to tell anybody anything,
right?
So no one can say, if Imani says I have 100 million copies, on the market, nobody can say otherwise. But conversely, nobody can prove that he doesn't.
Right.
So it's this thing that does it benefit him to lie, or does it benefit him to tell the truth? Depends on what you're doing. Like I have a friend who I know lies about his sales figures all the time. But what that actually helps him in that he's not lying about how many books he sold. He's lying about how fast he sells them. He'll condense all his books down. So he's got one box of books to take home from a convention and put 25 empty boxes on his table. At the end of the convention, say, I sold out. But what he actually did was take 24 half-empty boxes. But it creates FOMO, and it drives people to want to pick up his book. It's that kind of logic. So if you're looking to price books, the thing I would most tell you to do is just type it into eBay and look at sold listings. That's the most simplest. There are other sites you can use, but those sites are not always the most accurate.
I don't trust. I'm getting to the point. I don't trust eBay either, though.
Well, but I mean, the reality is, if you look at sold listings, eBay can't lie to you. Like, it might not be an accurate representation of where the book is at that moment, but it can be.
They can't lie to me, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean that what I'm seeing is overpriced. You know what I mean?
But it's what the book is going for. Like, if I put TMNT #1 into eBay and look at sold listings, it's going to tell me what that book has sold for. If I then look at that book from somebody and they say, well, this is a 9.8 on eBay for, whatever it is for eBay, you've clearly got a 6 and you're asking 9.8 prices. I know that you're asking too much. And now I can play the game of trying to get that number down. Conversely, if I see you have a 6 and you're asking significantly less than what they're asking for on eBay, I'm taking my chances, right? But it gives you an idea of what people are paying for the thing. Whether or not that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what people are paying for the thing. And something's only worth what somebody will pay for it.
So, see, this is one of the things I've been trying to wrap my head around. This is a perfect example. So, I don't even care. I really don't really care about this book, but now it's not. But it's a part of my personal canon now that I feel like I have to get this book now. Right? It's Meteor Man #1. When you couldn't pay me as a kid to buy this book. But Meteor Man #1, now it's on my radar. It's on my wish list, right? I look it up. I mean, comic book I don't even think it is even charts in Key Collector, but it's in comic book pricing guide. And it's saying for a graded 10.0 or 9, something ridiculous. It's like the prices are all over the place. For a 10, it's like it's going for $50. A 9.9 is $18. A 9.8 is $7. A 9.6 is $4.50. These are graded prices, right? Look up on eBay, the exact same book. Some of the copies of that book are going for $70, $100 for Meteor Man. And this is what I'm trying to figure out. It's like, what's driving that? Because it hasn't. One, it's like, why is it like the value so skewed all over the place? Number one, and number two, who's paying $100 for Meteor Man if it hasn't really, I just don't think that's feels like that is overpriced because there's no. It doesn't seem like there's any record to show to justify that value.
Right. But the thing about it is too, you got to remember that with websites,
freaking Meteor Man. All right.
Right. Yeah. They update at whatever rate they update their data. So it's entirely possible that comic book pricing guide hasn't updated the data as fast as somebody else. And so all of a sudden Meteor Man is going to show up in Meteor Man. We're talking the Marvel Meteor Man.
We're talking about the Robert Townsend movie adaptation Meteor Man, dude. Yeah, the Marvel Meteor Man. Yeah.
Okay. Marvel. So Meteor Man is going to show up in Guardians of the Galaxy 3, for instance. I don't know that that's true. I don't think that's right, but whatever.
Meteor Man?
Like, I don't know. I'm just making something up.
Oh, shit. Goddamn, man. You got to be careful with that stuff, man.
Right. No, but like, all of a sudden,
Meteor Man, everything. I can get canceled.
No, Meteor Man, right, is going to show up in a thing. We're going to call it Guardians 3 because it seems like everybody and their brother is going to be in Guardians 3. So that information comes out and it immediately affects something like a Key Collector and then eBay. Yeah. And some other sites, My Comic Shop or some of these other ones are really quick about updating their pricings. But a website like Comic Book Pricing Guide or Go Collect or some of those react a lot slower because they're waiting for an amount of data that would justify an update. Because something that could happen is they cast Harry Styles as Eros / Starhawk in Eternals. So all of those appearances are going to shoot right up. And if he doesn't show up in that, or if he gets killed in that movie, and it's, this is just a quick hit, those things are going to plummet. So why would I, and this doing websites and stuff, Why would I spend a ton of time doing a website update for something that's going to last a week? You know,
I
it's
don't know. All I know is
there's
that like a lot of these apps, they use eBay
right,
as the means to track and update their content. And
right.
if eBay is saying that this is the way it's supposed to direction it's going to go,
Mhm.
it's like
But is there
I
an
guess
amount of time or energy that you have to spend to do that update that
I don't
make it
know.
worth it to do it
Well,
immediately?
well, you know what it is. You know what the priority is. It's like they follow the hype too.
Hmm.
So if it's a hot book, they're probably updated a lot faster than Meteor Man.
Right.
It's like
Exactly.
mainly because it's not updated because not because the information is there not there. It's like it's not updated because it's not on their radar.
Right.
You know, but that's half of what I
Mhm.
personally have been dealing with as far as the books in this particular genre. It's like as far as black comics is that it tends to be there's so many of these books that are outside of the preview of apps, comic shops, retail.
Mhm.
It's like all this sort of this like
So,
it's that affects the um that immediately affects and creates rarity around some of these
right.
books. And so like and which would you would assume would actually
Mhm.
generate value for some of these books. So
Right. I don't want to cut you off, but hey,
no,
your
go ahead.
guest made it.
And we only got what 10 minutes.
Like 5 minutes.
We only got 5 minutes, bro.
Oh, man. First, let me apologize, man. I got my days mixed up, bro,
Oh,
and
no problem, no problem.
so my apologies, on that. Hopefully, we can do this again. So,
No, I'll bring. My schedule's open next week, man. We can do it if you if
oh,
you
okay,
down.
yeah, absolutely. I want to make that happen because we can't only do so much in 5 minutes, man.
No. At least I can introduce you. This is Richard Wright of
Yeah,
Black Comic Lords.
yes.
We're definitely gonna have him on next week for sure.
Mm. So we
No,
can
but
get a
yeah,
deep dive for sure. So, Black Comic Lords Facebook group. We talk all things, black comics, black characters, black creators, things of that nature. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
so um, I don't really know exactly what you want to close out with or whatever. I try to weigh in on something, whatever it may be.
Well, we were
Uh,
just talking about just the state of black collecting period. All this news about the paper shortages and first and second printings and things like that. But
okay,
most importantly, how um, we're trying to like one of the biggest things that I've been trying to do actually with my program is actually uh, put a put real numbers, real value to the books that we're collecting and we're seeking
right,
to collect because we know that these books are rare. They came in very short print runs. Um, Shops didn't order huge volumes of these books.
right,
Um, so they're very rare. But at the same time, all those aspects that would normally, create a huge value for other books don't necessarily translate into the value for ours. So, you know, I definitely want to dig into that. Might not even be able to dig into that now, but
right,
uh, but we're just talking about a lot of the things that are affecting collecting right now.
yeah. Well, to me, it boils down to just simply, three words: supply and demand. Saying if
Hmm.
the demand is for these books is out there, naturally the cost of them are going to go up or whatever.
Hmm.
One of the problems that we have in this space that mirrors commercial space is that sometimes books are in or the cost of books or the price of these books are inflated,
Hmm.
and the demand for those books may not necessarily reflect what's really practical. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've actually tried to buy books from people and they asked a crazy price for
Hmm.
what I'm looking for, but they can't give me any data, whether it's FMV or whether it's something that they may have saw on eBay.
Hmm.
The biggest thing I think is apart from that is making sure that the comic collector or the purchaser is informed. I think that's another thing too. Is like a lot of people are just not informed. You know, I'll give you one quick example. Blue Marvel, Adam, the Legend of Blue Marvel #1. That book goes from anywhere from the #1 goes from anywhere from, you know, I've seen it as high as 1,500 and as low as 400. But depending on the day of the week, you know, you know, people, you know, ask that kind of price. Now that print run on that particular book hovers around somewhere like 15,000, and so naturally that book is pricey just because of the low print run and its significance. I can only imagine what it's going to be when they introduce him into a movie or a show. But you know, that's just one example. That's a Marvel book. The character's been around since 2007, 2008, and so when you talk about modern books being, you know, pricey like that, you know, that's an issue. One of my biggest concerns is getting young people into the hobby in light of this demand for these books, and you know, because it's like, you know, if you're a kid, you're coming in, you're 15, 16 years old, and you want to buy the first appearance of Miles Morales, you know, you're priced out automatically.
Yeah, you're priced out. Yeah.
So, you know, you have to go to alternative methods or whatever, or different books or whatever. But, you know, I think that there is some demand for a lot of these books, but it depends on where you go. I will say that I found a Blue Marvel #4 in El Paso in a long box for $1. And the people that had that book clearly did not know the value of that book. You know, it was in El Paso. El Paso is largely, you know, Hispanic. There's a black population there, but none, I would say, significant enough to like warrant that book being on a wall versus a long box selling for $1.
Right.
So, you know, that's one of the benefits of people not knowing the significance of some of these books. You know, you can find certain things in dollar bins.
Right. But I'm sorry, bro. I'm actually up on my time limit. We want to get cut off. But like, I'm gonna bring you back next week. Please follow me at Black Comics Universe, and follow my man Richard Wright in Black Comic Lords. We're gonna be here next week.
That's what's up, man. Appreciate the time.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right.